So how does Eva Wright argue? Eva Wright's main line of argumentation seemed to be the following. I quote from her contribution, "Rightful Machines." So quote, "I argue that duties not to kill in the trolley problem take such normative priority not because they are negative duties, but because they are duties of right. Whereas conflicting positive duties to aid others in cases like footbridge are ethical duties. Duties of right determined authoritatively in public law take normative priority over conflicting ethical reasons for action. Foot's distinction between negative and positive duties roughly tracks the distinction between legal and ethical duties, since most legal duties are negative and most ethical duties are positive duties. But the relevant distinction is between duties of right and those of virtue." Unquote. Of course, we all heard this just 20 minutes ago, but of course this is an important point. Furthermore, Eva Wright tries to solve the problem by developing Philippa Foot's approach and clearly distinguishing the driver example from the footbridge example. The starting position, according to Wright, is, quote, "In driver you're faced with an unavoidable conflict between negative duties not to kill 5 and not to kill 1. Foot says, and since you must violate a negative duty not to kill someone no matter what you do, it is only rational to turn the trolley so as to inflict the least injury. By contrast, in cases of like footbridge, you are faced with a conflict between a negative duty not to kill 1, the large man, and a positive duty to protect the 5 from harm. Foot says, and in such cases, the negative duty takes priority over the positive duty, unquote. Since the argumentation in sum has to be seen, of course, in a Kantian perspective, I would like to raise a few questions concerning Eva Wright's perspective on Kant. So, chapter 2, queries concerning Kant. Interpretations of Kant's philosophy are notoriously difficult and delicate. In chapter 3.2 of her paper, Eva Wright seems to claim that there is some room for decision-making here regarding the Kantian position that it is forbidden to kill the large man. But since not to kill the large man is an a priori legal duty, there is no room for decision here. There is no different options for one or the other decision. Of course, one does not have to follow Kant, but Kant is a basis for Eva Wright's essay. And Eva Wright would of course claim that she perfectly follows Kant. One can get the impression that Wright is either A, arguing decisively non-Kantian or raising broader questions, that B, independently from Kant, she thinks ethics involves something like relativism or non-cognitivism. Regarding A, on page 230 below, Eva writes with regard to the driver example, some may object that by not turning the trolley, the driver avoids taking actions and so avoids violating any legal duty of right not to kill the 5, unquote. Eva Wright argues in the driver variation, by contrast, that there is a conflict between a duty of right not to kill the 1 and duties of right not to kill each of the 5. Some may object that by not turning the trolley, the driver avoids taking action and so avoids violating any legal duty of right not to kill the 5. But this objection fails because as the driver of the trolley, you are subject to a prior legal duty to drive the trolley safely, and failing to fulfill this duty therefore constitutes an action by omission, unquote, Wright. Here it is presumed that by driving straight ahead, the 5 people will be killed. In the same context, it should be mentioned that the maxim, drive safely, is a rather unfortunate formulation. The drive safely instruction is not the decisive factor. Rather, one could say that it is ethically imperative, for instance, not to drive under the influence of intoxicants and so on. Not diverting the trolley results in the death of 5 persons. Let us assume that I, as a trolley driver, do nothing. From my point of view, this means that not doing anything must not be interpreted as an act of killing, because I am not pursuing the purpose of killing if I am not allowed to divert the trolley. If I am only allowed to drive straight ahead, then I am de facto causing the death of 5 people, and yet I have reason to believe that this is not an act of morally prehensible killing someone. B. Eva Wright argues self-driving cars and other machines, another quotation, quote, self-driving cars and other machine agents programmed to act in accordance with popular ethical preferences would be immoral machines and seem to me to pose a threat on civil society. The goal of machine ethics should be rightful machines, unquote. Here, Eva Wright seems to rule out that machines programmed according to ethical principles could also be morally acting machines. Instead, we find the equation of ethics with, quote, popular ethical intuitions, unquote, page 228. And this, to me, seems confusing. Elsewhere, Eva Wright again toots in the same horn. We should prefer rightful machines to ethical machines, since ethical machines, quote, ethical machines that act on popular ethical preferences, such as those collected in the moral machine experiment, may not, unquote, page 235. According to Kant, and concurring with him for the sake of the argument, it is clear that ethical duties are duties. They must be categorically obeyed and are justified a priori. Kant is an objectivist and cognitivist. Simply put, it seems unclear to me whether the realm of law holds objective, clear solutions to the trolley problem, while ethical considerations lead us into the difficulties Eva Wright mentions. Maybe our notions on how the realm of rights and the realm of ethics interrelate are different. Chapter 3, rightful machines and some relations of rights and ethics. No, there is anyway no other slide, but it's a very short chapter. Rightful machines and some relations of rights and ethics. The question of who establishes and justifies a legal obligation, a duty of right, is also addressed by Eva Wright. As a matter of fact, law, even if it is justified a priori, requires conventional elements through its codification. Moreover, it seems to be plausible that we cannot escape legal positivism in the practice of legal interpretation. This is an interesting point, but I cannot go into here. What seems to me worth discussing, however, is that in the programming of rightful machines, the imponderables, cultural relative understandings of what legal obligations are should have to be taken more into account. There are countries in which a failure to render assistance is a criminal offense. In others, it is not. But what counts as a legal obligation should be discussed further in the ongoing debate about whether we should program ethical machines and or rightful machines. Now to chapter 4. Do I have time? No?
Short.
Short. Yeah. It is short. 2 minutes, 3 minutes? Yeah? Good. Eva Wright favorites the following notion of solution: distinguishing right from ethics and observing the priority of right thus solves Foot's original trolley problem. In footbridge, one has a duty of right determined authoritatively in public law not to kill the large man that therefore takes priority over one's ethical duty to save the five from harm. In driver, by contrast, there's a conflict between duties of right that the priority of right cannot resolve, and so rational and moral intuition falls back on minimizing harm. Prevailing intuitions to kill one, to spare five in driver, but not to do so in footbridge are thus both rational. This solves Foot's trolley problem, unquote. It seems doubtful to me to speak of moral intuitions that can be deceptive, rational moral intuitions. If the intuitions in the footbridge case, one must not kill the large man in order to save five others, and in the driver case, one may kill one in order to save five, should be equally rational, then one could nevertheless argue that in the driver scenario, a conflict of duties of right does not imply that, quote, rational moral intuitions fall back on minimizing harm, unquote, according to a utilitarian notion, for instance. My point is not that consequentialism or similar ethical theories are a better choice than Kantian ethics, virtue ethics, or the like, but that priority of right solves a problem, whereas ethics, in certain ways, is subordinate or consists essentially of moral intuitions. Apart from this objection, there is a more pragmatic argument why to program machines as rightful machines. Programming rightful machines, legally compliant systems, seems easier because legal decision-making processes can be standardized rather than ethical consideration processes. Whether, as Professor Wright suggests, machines will ever understand rights in a human sense seems very questionable to me. To come back to Kant one last time, Kant would certainly have disagreed with the thesis that machines can act and decide in the same way as humans within the realm of freedom. Thank you for your attention.